inside the big umbrella of more consistent funding that comes from the sales that are being generated versus having to always go to the public markets. So how best to replicate that? Now that we've got it established, we've got footholds, we've hired in another thing, Trevor, to your point earlier, we've hired in a lot of people to run those DPUs that are ex-biotech CEOs. So there's sort of a mindset coming that way. Now we bring in a model of a very successful one that already exists. And so people that are running these DPUs, welcome back, want to actually learn how do we succeed. And so they reach out and look at what's brought in. So. Okay, you're up, big guy.
All right, I hope this works now. We talked in our section F about... yeah. We spoke that GSK's drug discovery unit is structured very similar to an academic institution. So why do you think this structure is suitable for drug discovery? And secondly, how do you encourage collaboration between these distinct research groups?
Maybe I'll quickly answer it. Raj was that. So Moncef Slawi, he came last year. He has a very strong feeling, which I agree with, that smaller is better. And small groups are very innovative, and especially small groups that live or die with the success or failure of their project. And so you'll have many different functions in that group. Biologists at Citrus, we're biologists, chemists, clinical folks, pharmacologists, a couple of business people running around. And so I think that's a good way to organize it. Then the question is, how do you have them all talk to each other? They do a lot at GSK trying to make that happen, but it is definitely a challenge to integration.
Yeah, and I think there was a question in there too about how do we know that this is the right way to do it? We don't, but looking back over the metrics of the industry, of the pharma industry, the biotech industry over the last 20 years, what we do know is biotech has been a lot more successful at getting things into the clinic. That hasn't always translated into more products to market, but they are certainly doing a much better job at the early end of the funnel. And so trying to build, again, to replicate the way that they're modeled is what we're trying to do here, because the bigger behemoth organizations of industrializing discovery hasn't worked for us.
Great. Okay. You're up.
Hello. I would like to get back to the ethics question. You mentioned that you were worried about the development part and that later stage safety signals in an Alzheimer's child could probably put the diabetes thing at risk. I mean, with that you're saying that actually you try to develop drugs as fast as you can to get the efficacy data, but then cut them off before you get any safety signals as an end consumer. That really worries me.
By the way, I'm German, so I can make it. Has anyone seen Sprockets? You know, the Saturday Night Live thing. You're from Germany, probably, right? But people make fun of me too. I have that saying. I played that in the second-year medical school show. I think that the imperative is to move very, very quickly into the clinic and test in humans, whether you're right about the science with a safe compound. So never confuse speed with wanting to go forward with something that's safe. Many times people spend a lot of time optimizing and so Microsoft Windows 43, Windows 92, XP or whatever the hell. But a small company is much quicker, and it's about testing it with the consumer. Some companies like Apple have gone to the extreme of putting out imperfect products and having consumers help fix them with you. But my view is you get into man, you test it with something that's safe as soon as you can, because that's what's ethical.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just from an industry perspective, after buyouts, and for us, of course, more close to the vendió situation, we are extremely transparent about all of our clinical work now. There is a real focus on patient safety. And I can tell you from the business development side, so in addition to M&A, we had all of our licensing activities. We've turned down a lot of deals in the last 2 years for late-stage assets that we thought could even potentially be products, but the risk-benefit ratio to patients in our mind wasn't good enough to justify going for it. So there's a real mindset there.
Yeah. You will take one from here.
Just a quick question. What are your biggest learnings both from the transaction? What mistakes did you not make next time?
I got ready a long time ago. Some of the big learnings for us were an evolution from our previous big transformative acquisition, which was a company called Demantis that we did about 3 years earlier, which was a biopharm platform play for us. And in that one, we did too much of trying to put GSK infrastructure in there and just focused on the science. So I think very pertinent discussions today around HR and IT and finance, because what we did here is we gave them access to our stuff but didn't put it on them. So they kept their computing systems. We gave them a couple of GSK laptops that they can go access to give into our systems. So little things like that. But I think the big learnings for me from this one were all on the people side, the HR side. And things that we hadn't quite considered, like, your inability to do hiring and firing. Yes, you're a patrol freak, I understand, but there is something there, like, and how can we help educate the next sort of leadership team of a company we're bringing in on what life is like after, a little bit better, rather than the growing pains after it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, actually it's amazing. Like 2 years later, we're still kind of this independent company, and we have our own IT and HR, and so a lot of things went well, but those first 3 months are just so confusing. There are all these acronyms, you don't know what the hell any means. Everybody's visiting you because you're like the new baby to the family, and you can't figure out who you have to talk to, you don't have to talk to. And so it's that first 3 months, but the thing they did very well is they had a couple of people who were like our filter, and that actually worked incredibly well, I thought. Next question?
Yeah, so my question is for GSK. Given that citrus never really brought anything to market, what made you think this was the sort of culture to adopt?
They did in a matter of about 2 years.
Yeah.
Got some of the best venture funding behind it, which is always a good sort of surrogate for them. They're not dumb people putting their money down investments, so that's good. Christoph's track record, the track record of the management team, all factored in. And really, what we had done, what doesn't come through in the case here, that what led to the areas that we did put the DPUs in, we did a very robust therapeutic area assessment and a rebalancing. Into new exciting science work. What was that? I think it did come out because the searchman were one of the areas that we wanted to look at. So we looked at the searchman space, we really started to understand it and understand the potential here. And we find the leading company in that. And then you put all that together. That's what got us there. Once we got there, that's when we started to assess the culture. And the way we do that is both as a deal team through negotiation, but also the diligence teams, which is quite critical. So when we have during the diligence phase, our heads of chemistry and biology and so forth meet directly with their counterparts. They are distracted on They do an assessment too, both ways. So there's a cultural check to make sure there's going to be a fit. We've walked away from a lot of deals of really good assets where there wasn't a fit with the management teams, because if it doesn't work now, it's going to be bigger problems down the road.
Hey, Lloyd.
For taking your question. I'm a med student posing as a business student, and I have a question on a more general level about the process of drug discovery. So I'm curious to know what both of you think, both from the big pharma side and from the previous biotech and venture side, what you think of the big pharma model for drug discovery and development. I mean, there have been many reimaginations, many reorganizations and restructurings of big pharma, and still there's a barren pipeline. And it's going to get drier and drier and drier. And what does that mean in the coming era of personalized medicine? Does this kind of big model still have any hope, and is it something worth investing in and pursuing further?
You want to go into banking, or you want to do something else? It's been a tough decade. I mean, pharma companies, the stocks are all down 40–50% over the last 10 years. And it's gotten harder and harder to get drugs approved. And it's a little bit, my feeling is it's kind of like blaming the victim. Honestly, I think pharma companies are much better than biotechs at actually developing drugs. I think the regulatory thresholds have gotten so much greater, and the expectations on safety have gotten so much greater, probably appropriately. But it's gotten so expensive to develop these drugs.